there, tourists! Welcome inside Old House. We're your guides, Sandy and Sky, and today we'll be talking about Marcus's Instagram Ask Me Anything that occurred on December 19th, 2024. Disclaimer as always, please don't listen to episodes until you have finished reading the book. All episodes will contain spoilers from the novel We Used to Live Here, along with short stories related to the Polterkites Expanded Universe and the ARG. This episode is meant to be a bonus update episode, and we won't be going into any chapters or documents in detail. By the time this actually releases, I'm so sorry. It's early January and 2 weeks have passed since the AMA actually occurred. However, our initial episode will be out next week regarding the ARG, and we hope all subsequent episodes on updates and events happening will be released closer to real times. Today we'll be talking about some of our favorite questions from that AMA, but before we get into it, I wanted to quickly mention a message posted on behalf of Marcus on December 17th on the subreddit. He talks about how the Polterkite stories contain bits of truth, lots of misinfo, and characters might reappear, but they're ultimately not, quote-unquote, full canon, as he likes to say. His book, We Used to Live Here, is considered full canon, and going forward, I believe he'll make it clear which things are to be considered soft myths or not. There are still things we can take from the short stories, but he has made it clear. Bastian from the mall story is not Charlie's brother, and Kai from Eardripper is not Kai from We Used to Live Here. Howie, though, that guy certainly likes the color green. And before I move on, can we just stop here? He mentions green. That's the mistake, because Howie likes blue, right?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's
blue. So I don't know what to make of that. I think it was purposeful that he said green. He didn't make that same mistake twice.
Trying to remember when Howie at the end was like, my favorite color is color. I can't remember if it was green, and that's where people started thinking.
Yeah, at the end he says green. But Marcus mentions in, I think it was the book club, where it was just a mistake. And it was meant to be blue. So I don't know what this means. So we should just...
It's suspicious for sure.
It is suspicious. I don't know. We'll keep an eye on it, but it's... makes me wonder.
Mm-hmm.
He then goes on to say the Man in the Basement story is the closest to full canon story Reddit has right now, although he may backtrack on those words one day. However, Cubic Turtle asked during the AMA if there was any chance the other Old House stories on Reddit will be physically published at some point, and he did say yes, I have plans to officially publish many of my old Reddit stories. So we might be lucky in the future to have something. And this leads me to go on to say he has mentioned in the AMA as well that he has this announcement coming, this cool announcement coming soon, or another project. It's eating me alive. I want to know what it is. The suspense is killing me.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Anyway, moving on. Let's start with the first question.
All right, so Mackenzie Sky on Instagram asked, is Kettle Creek Mountain based off of Mount Hood? Marcus answers, not specifically based off Mount Hood, though I am in Oregon right now, so I'll definitely check out that area for research. There's actually a very small mountain town in British Columbia, Canada, called Yale that inspired Yale in the book. It even has an old abandoned motel with missing letters. It's much smaller than Yale in the book, however. So we actually talk about this theory in our next episode of the podcast. This is actually one of my favorite theories, which has now been debunked, but I'm going to keep it as a headcanon. So if you want to hear my crazy theory, make sure to listen to the next episode, and I'll talk about where I think Eve's house is located in reality, in our world.
Perfect. Question 2. Do you have a favorite chapter in We Used to Live Here, and one you think is the most important? Marcus replied, I think the opening chapter is pretty neat. I obsessively went over it with the help of my readers, probably 100 times too many. I also like the chapter late in the book where Eve comes back upstairs and everything really turns topsy-turvy. It's funny because I think we also went over that chapter many, many times, the Outsider chapter in our last episode.
Yeah.
Especially in preparation for that episode. And I also think it's funny because if you've already listened to episode 2 on The Outsiders, Sky and I also talk about how there are interesting things happening in the first chapter, Outsiders, and in the last few chapters that Eve is actually in Old House, which I think ends up being the same chapter that Marcus is referring to in this question.
I think so.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. I was trying to get out, what he thought was the most important chapter, and that would just make us obsess over that chapter a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we really got an answer to that, but I think I might actually pay a bit more attention to the last couple of chapters, but it just seems that those are his favorites. That's all.
I think it's fair. There, like we talked about in episode 2, there is a lot of foreshadowing
Mm-hmm.
in the first chapter.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, question 3. Do the archivists know about your book? If they do, how did they feel about it? Marcus answered, the so-called archivists are a prickly, strange lot. They've only sent me cryptic warnings here and there, and I choose not to respond. Marcus is actually smarter than I am because I am fully invested in emailing my archivist friend at this point. So if you're listening to this, my archivist friend, I've had a great time with these emails and hope that you weren't too hungover the next day. From what the email my archivist friend, and I'm just going to keep that name until I know an actual name, sent me that I posted on the Reddit, it sounds like the higher ups in the Old House archivists aren't too thrilled with Marcus publishing the book. Quote, it's not my fault that some author starts puking out Old House lore like free candy. Yeah, I love that line.
Me too. I love that.
I wonder if Marcus will ever share these warnings with us. I'm actually kind of worried that the archivist's eyes are on Marcus now and that he may be in trouble.
I think that's reasonable. And if he just keeps not responding, I hope that doesn't get him into more trouble by ignoring the messages.
That's true.
Yikes.
If they keep getting more insistent, especially if
Yeah.
he keeps writing.
Imagine. Yeah, exactly. I guess we'll see. In question 4, Kate Snow asks, what is the story behind when Thomas is found outside slapping himself? Marcus replied, seems like he's under an intense amount of stress. And I love that answer. I think he is. And I do think Thomas is fighting possession at this point. And we may never know the actual answer to this question, but it's a great question. I still feel Thomas is a good guy and he's trying to fight whatever negative entity is hopping in and out of him. And I just imagine in that moment that, you know how in The Man in the Basement, they just like hop into someone through their eyes and they can see out?
Yeah.
I feel like in this moment, maybe Thomas has gotten himself back and he's like trying to fight whatever's hopping in and out of him. And he's obviously not doing the best job at it.
I can't imagine it's very comfortable.
Yeah.
Like having someone else possessing your body. That would be very mentally straining for one thing.
Yeah, and then this also could go into the theory of the medications, right? The quetiapine that he's taking.
Mm-hmm.
That I guess we'll talk about in episode 4 when we go over memory lane. But who knows? It might be that he needs to stay calm to keep whatever that is hopping in and out. And maybe it's the high levels of stress that give those things an opening. Who knows?
That makes sense. He could also be an anchor vessel, which actually ties really nicely into the next question. Are anchors only able to possess specific people? Marcus answers, it's debatable that anchors can even possess anyone at all. Heck, most of the Old House folks don't even agree on what an anchor is to begin with. And I'll admit this is one of my questions. I realized I should have asked it in another way. I'm aware of the character limit now, so hopefully I'll be able to ask better questions in the future. Anchors don't possess people, they are anchor vessels, and my theory is that they are the people designed to become the corporeal temporary form for disembodied spirits or gods of Old House in order for them to utilize and be able to physically interact with humans, Earth. It seems that even the archivist higher-ups might be this type of vessel. In the email I recently posted, it said, my boss has a boss, and he has a boss, and the running joke is they all have a boss who's an anchor vessel, and when the anchor comes down on them, they come down on me. So are the archivists a cult, essentially, for the creator, god, eldritch being of Old House?
It's a good question.
I don't think this is the last time we'll see anchor vessels.
Let us know what you think about that. Add it to the comments, add it to the subreddit. We're curious.
Definitely.
The next question, Megatron asks, when Eve came back and the window had changed, was she already in a different timeline? Marcus replies, everything is up to interpretation, but I'm not even sure timeline is the right way to think about it. Perhaps it's a different house or a different room in a much, much larger quote-unquote house. ... We will definitely have to remember next time to not refer to these as timelines. Anything after episode 3, we will try our best to refrain from using that term. And after reading this, I do think a better way to speak about them is maybe classifying them as different old houses. We talk about this in episode 3. We'll give you more details on that there, but I do feel this aligns with our whole theory about Old House underwater.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you guys are unclear about that, we can bring it up again later, but I do feel I don't want to spoil it too much for the next episode, but maybe read Old House Underwater and see what you think. Sky also has a good theory, but in the interest of time, I think it's best if she explains this a bit better and posts it with a visual on the subreddit. So I'll add a link to the description once she has that up there, but she has a pretty good theory.
I'll never stop talking if we add that to this episode. The next question is Old House a god or the creation of a god? Or is it a king in yellow and all of the above? Marcus answers, I won't answer this directly, but I will say not to take the title Old House too literally. If it actually wasn't for the ARG and the Archivist team, and we used to live here, I would actually have never read The King in Yellow by Robert Chambers for myself. There's a lot of similarities between the two. One of my favorites is that this character Hastur, or the King in Yellow, which is described as a person, a place, some stars, I think, throughout various short stories and books. You really don't know who or what the King in Yellow is. And similarly, we don't have any idea of who or what Old House really is. We just know that it isn't just a house. The Maplewood Mall and some of the other short stories have different versions of Old House. I know that that is loose canon, but I think it's safe to say that Old House isn't always a house.
Yeah, I agree. And the last question is, do you keep up with the Old House archive to see if people are figuring things out? And Marcus replied, yes. Reddit is hard blocked on all my devices, but I actually have ADHD. But my sibling and a friend screenshot posts, comments, threads, and update me regularly. It always makes my day. And I totally get this. I think for his own mental health and well-being, it's probably best that he keeps away from it and focuses on, especially, writing his new book, The Caretaker. After all, isn't it so easy to get sucked into Old House? And before you know it, you've fallen down this rabbit hole and you're having a hard time getting out. If you even want to get out. I'm residing willingly. I think you are too.
Definitely.
That may change in the future, but currently we're here because we want to be.
It definitely lives rent-free in my mind.
Yeah.
All right. That's actually all the time we have for today, which is why we only did some of the questions. So listen to next week's episode on the property document, and where we give kind of an overview of the ARG and where we are currently at with that, to get a better picture of what's going on. Future updates regarding the ARG, as well as when we do the AMAs, will be closer to real time as they happen. But the way everything worked out episode-wise, we needed to do this first before we talked about the ARG.
We'll also add to the description a link to the post on the subreddit that has all the questions from the AMA this December. So we're sorry that we didn't include all of them. We kind of just wanted to go over a few that were related to Old House, but there's lots of questions there, a lot of answers about kind of Marcus and what inspired him to write this book and all that kind of stuff, which are very interesting and we really liked as well. So if you want to see what those are, go to the description and you can check out all the answers and questions there.
Let us know what you think of the questions too. Comment on it. All right. As always, we're your guides, Sandy and Sky, and we'll see you next time, tourists.
See ya.